Today's Tough Topics show may be triggering to some listeners. Today's show includes topics of rape and sexual assault and graphic depictions of rape and sexual assault.
Tough Topics, Kutztown University Radio's monthly community interest radio magazine, discussing issues few other shows are discussing. Addressing women's and LGBTQ+ issues, Tough Topics takes a deep look into issues that affect our lives. And now, from the Kutztown University Radio studios, your host of Tough Topics, Trisha.
Welcome to Tough Topics. You're listening on KUR. I am your host, Trisha, and with me today I have Samantha, and I'm going to go ahead and let her introduce herself.
Hey, Trisha, thanks for having me. Like she said, my name is Samantha Smith, and I'm a freshman here at KU, and I think that's all that I have.
Cool. I love the short intros. We're going to be talking about something today that, this sounds kind of weird, but it's one of my favorite topics to talk about. I think it's a very interesting concept, and I think it offers a lot of answers to why certain things are happening. And so today we're going to be talking about rape culture. I always like to describe it as like it is just a piece of the overall larger puzzle of like sexual violence and sexual assault. So for anyone that is not super familiar with rape culture and like what it means, as always, I love to do a quick like Google search just to see like what information pops up if you just search rape culture. And according to Wikipedia, it is defined as a sociological concept for a setting in which rape is pervasive and normalized due to societal attitudes about gender and sexuality. So one of the easiest ways I've always understood rape culture is it's the way we talk and think about rape and sexual assault. Some other background on it, it was technically created and coined during the second wave of feminism during the 1970s, even though this is something I thought just like happened more recently, like, you know, the whole Me Too movement and things like that. When was your like first time like learning of rape culture?
I learned about rape culture a lot when Me Too started in October of 2017, and I started doing a lot of research around there. And I think the definition that you found really hits a lot of important points, that it's all about how we talk about not even just sexual violence, but about misogyny, about the patriarchy, about gender violence in particular, and how all those little microaggressions that kind of build up and create this entire society that looks at different things that aren't okay, but we say, oh, well, this is normal though, even though it's not okay. It's something that's normalized in our culture.
Yeah, I think that's the biggest point of the definition or the meaning behind rape culture, is this idea that like we have somehow as a society like normalized violence against women, violence against the LGBTQ community, violence against all these different people and communities. And then like, because it feels so normal, we're just like, I guess this is fine. I guess
like it's always been that way.
Yeah, like you're like, well, if it's always been like this, then I guess like, well, we're fine. I don't know.
Yeah, and I hear a lot of people defend it a lot, and it's like, it's a bandwagon fallacy. You can't just say, oh, well, it's always been like this, because that's not okay that it's always been like this. And even though the term, I guess, rape culture started with that second wave of feminism in the 70s, rape culture has been around forever. It started in the beginning of time, because it started with the patriarchy and how people inherently put down women, not even purposely. Like, I can almost guarantee everybody does it in some little aspect that we don't realize, but none of it is going to change until we're open to hearing those criticisms about ourselves and recognizing those things about ourselves, even if they are inadvertent.
Yeah, I feel like sometimes it's hard because, you know, I think that automatic response of being like, well, it's always been like this, is coming from a place of feeling really overwhelmed. Like, we know it's a big problem, and so what do we do about it? Like, I'm one person. I can't change a whole society's thinking and value of a certain person.
Yeah, definitely. I think what I can say to people who feel like that is that you are one person, but you're one person who teaches one other person, and then you both teach 2 other people and 4 other people and 8 other people, and it's this entire ripple effect. And eventually you will change the world by using your single voice to change one person's mind or teach one person something.
Yeah. It all starts with just conversations and, talking about things. Like, when you get together with your friends and you're like, this happened to me today, and they're like, oh, I experienced that like 2 days ago. I mean, it's easy for things like that to set like wildfire almost, I feel.
And it like so many people go through it, and we don't realize that as society. Like this whole 97% thing that we're hearing about right now, that 97% of women have been sexually harassed or assaulted or raped, and people are so like pushing back so hard against that because they can't accept that like so many people in their lives have been through this, and whether it is right or wrong, it doesn't matter what percentage, it's too many.
Yeah, absolutely. I feel like bringing up that percentage, that 97%, is like, it answers that question of like, okay, is it even real? And it's like, yeah, it's happening. Like if rape culture was not a thing, if it did not exist, we would not see the staggering numbers and statistics revolving around sexual violence. And it always baffles me when people are like, oh, that's not real. That's not a real thing. We don't actually like condone sexual assault. And it's like, no, not necessarily. Like, to understand rape culture, you kind of need to understand that it's not necessarily like a society or a group of people that are like outwardly promoting rape. They're like, we're not going around being like, yes, rape is great. Like, let's keep that up. Like, cool. Sometimes it is. There are people out there that do think that like it is perfectly okay to rape someone, and obviously that is bad. When we talk about rape culture, though, like we're talking about something that's a little bit more like implicit than that. We're talking about like cultural practices that we engage in together as a society that ultimately excuse or tolerate sexual violence. More often than not, it's the situations in which sexual assault or rape and gender and general violence in itself is ignored or trivialized or, made into jokes or, like we've said, normalized. It takes place in so many different areas of life. So like I said, rape culture can like manifest itself on like a lot of different levels. It's practices that, together we engage in. Those practices can be individual, they can be group, they can be, just like I said, in all different spaces. I just mentioned the fact that we had a president that was like, that had like outwardly and publicly said, like, grab him by the pussy. Mm-hmm. Like, and just outwardly like had,
no shame about it.
Yeah, like there was
allowed it.
Mm-hmm.
And just like even seeing somebody at that level and this like national public level say something like that, that allows every single person in the world to say that same thing and do those same actions, and that is completely unacceptable.
Mm-hmm. I feel like people don't understand that, like, you don't have to outwardly say that something's okay because our behaviors and our implicit messages from our behaviors say it's okay. If you're having conversations with your friends and, they're joking about, doing just messed up things, and you're awkwardly laughing, right? Because we're uncomfortable, because we can recognize that it's not okay, or that we're not, we don't believe that, but we don't know what to do in that situation. So we just awkwardly laugh. That, even though it's awkward, that laughter is still an indicator that what they're doing is okay.
Yeah. And even like staying silent is something that's saying, oh, well, nobody's pushing back on this, so it must be fine. Or nobody else thinks what I'm thinking, that this is wrong, so I shouldn't say anything. There's all these different reasons that people might not speak up. And it can be really hard, especially when you're with friends, to say, hey, hold up, this isn't okay.
Right.
But even like, I know, even with all the work I do, I'm not perfect. I've had times where I've heard people say things and I've not said anything because I didn't know what to say. And that's another piece of this entire puzzle that we need to try to overcome as best we can, just to like stand up for the people that aren't in the room, or stand up for the people that aren't there in that situation, but tell our friends or tell the people that we hear, hey, this isn't okay.
Yeah. I mean, for anyone that's listening, if you've ever heard the phrase like silence is violence, that's like what we're talking about right now, is like staying silent and not speaking up can perpetuate cycles and systems. Just more change always happens when we stand up and like fight for what we believe in, even though it's really uncomfortable when we do that. But I feel like no change comes from a comfortable place.
Yeah, and even if it's not something as outward as joking about messed up things, like the one scenario that I'm referring to, somebody said that they were too ugly to be raped, and that perpetuates that entire idea that rape is about what you look like or what you wear or the kind of way you present yourself in society. And even to this day, this was years ago, but this still bothers me that I didn't say anything, because just educating that person, because they obviously didn't think about what that message is implying. But when you really think about it, it's not something and not a message that we want to continue to put out there into society.
Absolutely. It's this idea that like our like my value as a woman comes from how I look and how I dress and what I do, and not like the qualities that I bring to the table. Yeah, I mean, there's so many different links back to like toxic masculinity and the patriarchy, and like why all of that needs to be like readdressed and dismantled and all of that. And that's a conversation for another day. You know, a good rainy day conversation. You know, let's talk a little bit about like some specific examples of rape culture, because, you know, we've kind of talked about it a little bit more on a broader aspect. I mean, we've talked about obviously some examples like those quote unquote jokes, right? About, you know, well, they were too ugly to be raped. So rape jokes, and the people that also defend them, they're also lumped in that category of perpetuating rape culture. And rape jokes, and I was giving a presentation, and in my presentation on relationship and sexual violence, I talk about rape culture. And I got to the example of rape jokes, and I was like, can anyone like think of a rape joke that they've heard before? And someone shared, you know, those jokes of like that a test raped them, or like a game raped them. And I had not thought of that as like an example, but I was like, yeah, that's a brilliant example. This idea that like, I don't even know how to like unpack that one, honestly.
It's just it's almost like trying to make light of something that makes people really uncomfortable. And I can understand that, because it is a defense mechanism to try to make yourself more comfortable in a situation. But honestly, we have to get comfortable with that, with feeling uncomfortable. And we have to be able to have serious conversations about that without making jokes about it. And that gets into the whole aspect of dark humor. And I don't know how many of y'all are on TikTok, but the amount of justification of rape jokes for dark humor is disgusting. And they hide it behind any rude, like any bullying comment. They will say it's dark humor. I've been told that I deserve to be assaulted. I've had people duet my videos and say to rape all women and say it's a joke. And obviously that's not a joke. And quote a little psychology today, sarcasm is hostility disguised as dark humor. All you're doing is you're acting like a bully, but you're deciding to justify it.
Yeah, I do not have TikTok, so I'm not super aware of that aspect of TikTok, but that sounds like garbage. And I think it's also just a lot of times when people are making jokes like, oh, that test raped me. It's a brilliant example of how we minimalize or trivialize rape and make it seem way less than what it actually is. And that in itself is just not okay. You know, I think this is why it can be really hard to get people to take it seriously and to like just, and to understand it's like really huge impact on people's lives. Wow, I'm sorry that happened, of like people did that on TikTok. I love it. I love the bullying. It's so good.
Yeah.
Just kidding. There's this other idea, and this one I love bringing up because, you know, we don't talk about this aspect of the community, is this assumption that men can't be raped or assaulted.
Yeah, it's so outdated.
When in fact, 1 in 6 men have been sexually abused. And, you know, holding on to this idea that men can't be assaulted continues rape culture, or continues, you know, allowing for it to happen, because, you know, if it's something that doesn't happen, there can be no solutions for it, right? Like, it wasn't rape because we don't do that to men. That idea, I don't know if that's computing the way I want it to, but that's what I'm kind of thinking in my head.
Yeah, it's just, so I spoke on a panel once about some of my stories, and one of the questions that I got was, do you think that male survivors have the same, like, do they have the same respect in your mind, essentially, as female survivors? And what I said to that was, the only distinction is your gender or your sexuality. There's otherwise no plausible excuse or explanation to put down somebody else who was assaulted or who was raped. That's just, it's completely unacceptable. And it's this stereotype, and that gets into the whole entire idea of victim blaming. It's blaming somebody because it couldn't happen to them, right? Because so if we get into the whole toxic masculinity aspect of it, men are strong and powerful, and that's what they're supposed to be, quote unquote. But if you look at really why we victim blame in the first place, it's because we don't want to believe that this could happen to us. So what we say is that, oh, well, it has to be their fault. They have to have deserved it, because it's easier to believe that somebody deserved it rather than to believe that somebody in our community did something atrocious for absolutely no reason. And we don't want to believe that it could happen to ourselves. So especially, I feel like with male sexual assault survivors, they're told that they need to be strong. And so men who adhere to this toxic masculinity aspect don't want to believe that it could happen to them or it could happen to somebody they know, because they're supposed to be this certain way.
Absolutely. And those messages that boys learn during childhood and their adolescent, you know, during those like really formative years, actually are, you know, shape how a male survivor actually talks about their assault too. A lot of times men don't say the language of, I was sexually assaulted. They will say things like, well, something bad happened to me when I was like 7. They won't name it because it was never supposed to happen. And like we just said, like, you know, men are supposed to be, quote unquote, supposed to be these like strong men, like all of that garbage. And it really impacts, you know, how male survivors conceptualize their assaults and talk about them, and or don't talk about them, because we don't see a lot of like, not information, because like we've gotten better, but like at one point there was no information, there was no resource like 1 in 6 for male survivors. And so, you know, it just, you know, like women, and like there just wasn't, we didn't talk about that. So again, more rape culture. Being catcalled or catcalling people. I think this might have trended somewhere. I'm not sure. Don't quote me on that. But I know, I feel like I saw somewhere like girls sharing like the first memory they have of being catcalled and like what age they were. I remember being as young as 11 when I was first catcalled. And like being a 25-year-old woman now, I like look back on my like adolescent years and I'm like, I was a child.
Mm-hmm.
Like, there are people out here just straight up catcalling children. And like, we're cool with that, right? Like, that's another issue that just kind of goes like swept under the rug almost.
And we're taught it's like compliments. So like, we should like it. We should be okay with it because they're just complimenting us. If you ask me on the street if I have a boyfriend, you are not complimenting me. You are catcalling me. Period. End of story.
Yeah, that idea that like we're supposed to be flattered that like we're getting catcalled, and I'm like, I was 11. Like, what? Like, no answer to that. Like, no explanation will ever justify why it was okay to be catcalled at age 11. Mm-hmm. And like you said, like being asked like, oh, you got a boyfriend? It's like, ew, go away.
Yeah.
Like, do you have a wife? Do you have a partner? Like, I'm sure they wouldn't really appreciate it if they found out that you were catcalling some like 11-year-old.
Really? And even if it's not just like, when you think of traditional catcalling, it's calling somebody out on the street. But I feel like, especially in the digital age that we're in right now, so many people are doing that online too, through your DMs, through your Snapchat, Insta, Twitter, etc. I was 14. I had a 23-year-old guy ask me if he was turning me on. And that's not okay. This entire culture of it. So it's not just what you see on the street. Call out your friends if they're doing it, obviously. But it's even what they're doing in their private DMs and what they're sending out to women and how they're, even girls, women and girls, and objectifying them.
Mm-hmm. You know, I want to make something kind of clear at this moment, that while I've kind of gendered it pretty heterosexually, of like, men are the perpetrators and women are the victims of this, right? Women can perpetrate rape culture just as much as men can.
Absolutely.
And a lot of times women, there's the, going back to the men being survivors and that assumption that men can't be assaulted, there's also a like sub assumption of that women can't rape men. And they can.
Absolutely.
And if you think that they can't, I'm going to need you to reevaluate yourself and like do some deep reflection.
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to take this moment to like educate some people on the fact that like an erection does not equal in all cases that men want what's happening.
Mm-hmm.
An erection at its core is a biological response to stimuli that's happening in that area. And that's important to understand because there's, you know, that whole idea that women can't rape men because like, well, he got an erection, so like he clearly wanted it. And it's like, no, he got an erection because like things were happening down there. It didn't mean he actually wanted it. So yeah, keep that in mind.
Like you laugh if you're tickled.
Yeah. So keep in mind, women can perpetrate rape culture and, you know, feed into it just as much as men can. I think part of the reason why I have gendered it the way I have thus far is partly because statistically, the most common situation is of men, like that men are the perpetrators and women are the victims. But violence doesn't discriminate. It doesn't.
And that's like
really
outright too. Like that's saying men catcall women on the street, but that doesn't mean that all of us as women or as non-binary people or anybody else, that doesn't mean that we don't contribute to rape culture. We do in some way, inadvertently or purposefully, but we still do contribute to this narrative and contribute to these ideologies that women are lesser or submissive or passive.
Let's see, what else we got? We got the lovely gender stereotypes. This kind of actually is perfect with what we were just saying, that women are submissive and sexually passive and that men are dominant and sexually aggressive. Just love that classic stereotype. Yeah, those are wrong.
Yeah.
Some of these I'm like, I don't know if we need to expand on them because like, I don't, partly like, yeah, like we can't do all the work for everyone, right? Like we can't like explain everything. If you think that there's something like right about that statement, might want to look into that. Yeah. Samantha, are you familiar with Brock Turner's case?
Unfortunately.
Okay. The reason why I asked is because I bring his case up in some presentations that I do, and it's getting like there's less and less students that are aware of that case. Mm-hmm. Partly because time has passed. Mm-hmm. So, you know, we get less passionate about stuff, or just, you know, things just happen. For anyone that's listening and is not familiar with Brock Turner and the case that, you know, came with that, is Brock Turner was a Stanford student and was known for being an athlete. I think he was a swimmer. And before I continue to mention anything about him, I've recently started to really think about how I introduce him when I talk about him, because I used to introduce him as he was a Stanford swimmer. And that was something that was used in the court case as a reason to not punish him. And I thought about how, like, when we continue to like use those identities that are reasons why they shouldn't be punished for whatever they did, it continues that cycle. Mm-hmm. And so I've started to introduce him as a Stanford student, like, because, you know, that was a fact of it. Like, he went to Stanford, and then what he was known, like why he was like a big thing there. Anyway, to continue moving on that, he was found by 2 grad students behind a dumpster on top of his, at that time, victim, who was anonymous. She didn't come forward for a while. She was completely incapacitated. She was passed out. From the reports, her panties had been pulled down, her shirt was lifted, and like I said, she was passed out. Brock did admit to penetrating her with his fingers, so he technically, like, by definition, raped her. And he faced, I'm trying to think of the amount. Anyway, he was sentenced for 6 months in jail. 6 months. And only served 3 of them. His dad was quoted for saying that that's a steep price to pay. What was the quote? I'm like blanking on it, of course, because I'm not in the same context of why, like, when I give this presentation. It was a steep price to pay for 20 minutes of action. Let me like just reiterate. 20 minutes of action with an unconscious girl. Those aren't the same. There was a thing going around on Facebook at one point that was like, we were in quarantine longer than Brock serving his sentence. And I always use Brock Turner's case as an example because it is like an absolute, like, solid example of rape culture. Like, all the factors were working together in this case to like perpetuate rape culture. Mm-hmm. I don't know. It's just, that case is wild to me.
You can hear how like speechless we are because there's just no possible defense. It's a gross miscarriage of the justice system, and this is why so many victims and survivors don't feel comfortable coming forward, because people aren't going to do anything about it. And you can see that clear as day with this case. There's no possible acceptable reason he only got 6 months in the first place, because there was proof on so many sides. There were bystanders that stepped in. There were people who spoke up. There were all of these factors that should have meant that he should have spent years and decades in prison, but he did not. And I just read an article about how there was a reporter, I don't remember which news station, so I'm not going to say, but they said that it's sad to see a bright kid's future go to waste like this. He wasted his own future. He threw his own future out of the window the second he touched that woman. There is no other possible anything for it.
Yeah. And that's why earlier I said about, how it's important to change that language, and why I stopped introducing him as a Stanford student or a Stanford swimmer, because that was another thing that they used in terms of this could ruin his future. This could ruin his future as a swimmer. And it's like, oh, he did that already. He did that himself. Mm-hmm. He made that choice. No one made that choice for him.
And I feel like that's an important point to bring up, that rape culture as a whole is something that contributes to our society. But the only person to blame when somebody is assaulted or when somebody is raped is the perpetrator or perpetrators. You can't blame rape culture for doing that to somebody because they made that conscious decision to assault somebody.
Yeah, that's a great point. That's an important one to keep in mind. I had another thing I wanted to mention about that, and I don't remember. Well, I guess I'll just wrap up that point, and then we'll take a break. Like I said, for a while, his victim was quiet, not quiet. She didn't, anonymous. Thank you. And recently, within the last year or so, she came out and was like, I am Brock Turner's victim, and has taken power back about that. And her name is Chanel Miller. She has a book out called Know My Name, and she's created some videos too that are really good to watch as well. She's done a 60-minute interview that outlines, she did an interview where she just reads her victim impact statement that's 12 pages long. And then she also does an interview with 60 Minutes and talks about that and talks about the experience. And one of the things that I always mention that I think is always hits me a certain way is, and this will kind of lead us into our next section that I think is really important for us to talk about, and it's victim blaming. There's this idea that if you do something bad, then you deserve to be assaulted. And in this case, people looked at Chanel and they were like, well, you got blackout drunk, so that meant you deserved to be assaulted. Two things on that in terms of Chanel. One, she is quoted, and I love this part. I love her example of this. She's like, assault is not a consequence of drinking too much or blacking out or consuming too much alcohol. A hangover is. Second, when I was reading her book, one of the parts that really stuck with me up until now is she woke up in the hospital and had no idea what happened. She was pulling twigs out of her hair. Her panties were gone and she had no idea. And everyone just kind of danced around it. No one directly was like, I'm really sorry to have to say this to you, but we think that you were assaulted. And I can't imagine how scary that is to wake up in a hospital and have to somehow put together these pieces. And yeah, I think that's just a really powerful thing to think about. So yeah, right now we're going to take a break, just a short one, and we'll be back. You're listening to Tough Topics on KUR. Welcome back. You're listening to Tough Topics on KUR, and I'm your host, Trisha. Today with me, I have Samantha. And today we're talking about rape culture, which is one of my favorite topics to talk about. For anyone that's possibly just tuning in now, we just covered a vast range of things about rape culture. We defined it, and then we just finished talking about some really specific examples, and we're leading into an example that I think is very important to talk about because I don't think it's talked about often enough, and they go hand in hand, and that is victim blaming. So, I don't know, Samantha, what is victim blaming?
Well, victim blaming is when either inadvertently or purposely you place the blame onto the victim. It's exactly what it sounds like. And you make it seem like it's their fault or that they deserved it for some reason. Now, there is a psychological phenomenon, which I did describe a little bit earlier. And I want to be clear that I didn't describe that to excuse it in any form, but sometimes when we understand why we do something, it's easier to overcome it and to look at it.
Yeah, absolutely. There's definitely a difference between using an explanation as a resource to make change and using an explanation to excuse it. And you're absolutely right. Like, the more we understand like why we do it, the more we can like try to change it, right? The more we can be aware of how we might perpetuate victim blaming or how we might victim blame without knowing it. Because sometimes it really can be like these small statements that we think are supportive or like are trying to just understand what happened, but are largely more victim blaming. So, an example of what I was just mentioning is like, if friends might not know how to respond to their friend disclosing that they were sexually assaulted, and they say something like, well, like, did you say no? Did you like, how did you respond? Right? Like, that's not always with the intent to blame the friend, right? It's like this more of like, oh, I don't know what to say, so like, I'm just going to try to understand. But that shifts the blame to that the friend could have done something different to prevent it happening. Mm-hmm. Which I think that speaks to this just bigger idea that victim blaming, or a really big example of victim blaming, is that it is a lot of times apparently the victim's responsibility to keep themselves safe. Mm-hmm. It's those safety tips. Walk in a group. Carry your keys between your fingers. Keep pepper spray with you. Instead, teaching perpetrators how to respect people and what boundaries look like and how to navigate those boundaries, how to have conversations about boundaries. Yeah.
How to set boundaries and how to respect them.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know, Tessa, have you watched Bridgerton?
I have.
So there's some great points in there. And actually, in one of the episodes, I can't remember character's name for the life of me, but she raped him. And a lot of people cannot understand that because she's a woman raping a man. And he said yes in the beginning, but then he said no. She should have stopped. They're blaming him because he should have told her why he didn't want kids in the first place. But that does not excuse the fact that he said no and she continued. And she knew that he would not have wanted this in the first place. So even if he hadn't said no, she should not have done it because she knew that he did not want this.
Yes. I remember seeing backlash about that and how people definitely looked at that and they were like, well, like, he should have done something about it. And it's like, no.
You shouldn't have done it.
Right. Like, that was messed up for Daphne to have put him in that position. And yeah.
To have done that at all.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So yeah, I don't know. The idea that like it's the victim's responsibility to not get raped, I think is just goes hand in hand with rape culture.
Mm-hmm.
Because again, like we're not putting the accountability to where it like actually should be.
Mm-hmm.
And one other way we do that is through language.
Yes.
I don't know, Sam, if you want to take that one or if you want me to like introduce it.
Yeah, I can start that. So one of the biggest ways that we as a society perpetuate rape culture is through the language that we use. Now, one of the most basic examples is in the media you see all the time, this person had non-consensual sex with this person. No, sex is consensual every single time. Non-consensual sex is not a thing. That is rape. Period. End of story. I understand that sometimes it's an uncomfortable word to use, but it's an uncomfortable thing to go through too. We have to be able to respect people enough to not say, oh, well, this was supposed to be like this, but no, it was rape. That's it. Another way that we do this is through something called the invisible perpetrator. So, for instance, let's say somebody was raped. If we say, this person was raped, there is no agency in there. There is no perpetrator in there. Something happened to this person. Whereas if we say, so-and-so raped this person, there is that agency, there is that perpetrator in there that says this person did something to this other person. We are putting the responsibility where it belongs on the perpetrator, not saying, oh, well, something happened to the victim. And maybe they could have done something about it, maybe not, but something still happened to them. Somebody did something to them. Yes, something happened, but somebody had to do it. It's not like having a hurricane. A hurricane you can't really control. The whole climate change issue is a different topic. But if there's a hurricane, you can't exactly control that, whereas people are in control of their actions when they're doing something wrong, when they are assaulting somebody, when they are raping something. You make that decision to do that. So that agency needs to be placed onto the correct party.
Absolutely. It's, it's a whole way to excuse something just through the use of language. Samantha, throughout the time you've mentioned that, that you didn't speak up or you didn't say anything and that we didn't report. What do you think like students need to know about reporting?
I think, so this is everything specific to Kutztown University. I know that there's state policies, there's federal policies, and there's Kutztown POSHI policies. So what I can say for Kutztown is that you are subject to being reported if a mandated reporter is told by somebody that you told or somebody that found out about your story, is subject to report. If they see your story online, they can report. They do not have to report if it is in a school project, like if you write an essay about it, if it's in an in-class discussion, or if it's some other place that's mandated reporting exempt, like Take Back the Night. But they still can report if they feel the need to. That is only if you do not say how old you were or you are overage. If you are underage, any mandated reporter, and this includes almost all student employees except RMAC, something like that, employees, and all faculty and staff. So what happens is you'll get an email from the Title IX coordinator, and at least this is what happened in my experience. Now I'm at home this semester, so I know some people who've had public safety come to talk to them, but I also had Childline called on me. So essentially, now this is where it gets a little bit tricky, because when we get into the Campus Safe Act, so this was signed into law as a part of the Violence Against Women Reauthorization Act in 2013. Now, one of the policies that was outlined in this act is that institutions of higher education, they're required to afford the victim, and I quote, the right to decline to report to law enforcement. Now, what Childline access is almost like a middleman, where any underage instances are reported to Childline, who reports to the DA's office. So in our case, or at least in my case, it was the Lehigh County DA, and that's who called me. So I don't know if that, because it's like a catalyst almost in the middle, that it exempts it, or if it just can't follow federal and state policies. But there's a whole thing about a Penn State case, which is why it's so strict. But I know that they are very strict here. I think that's about all I have to say about it.
Yeah. You know, when Samantha and I were like meeting prior to, or just chatting before, you know, recording and doing the show, we talked about how, you know, there could be people that listen, or just other people involved that are technically mandated reporters while listening to this. And then that kind of sparked a bigger conversation about like, how much do we give detail and like of our experiences. And, you know, one of the reasons why I always like to bring up reporting and who a mandated reporter is. And like you said, that's student, staff, it's all faculty, staff, and yeah, and housing. And housing has its own protocol too. And
student employees, so like tutors, note takers.
Yep. So all those people are mandated reporters. And that means if they, like Samantha said, if they learn of an incident, they are mandated to report it to the university. And then based on Title IX, the university has an obligation to investigate it. It's important to know that because not everyone's ready to report. And not everyone wants to report. And so you have 2 fully confidential resources on this campus at Kutztown that you should be aware of, that they have no reporting obligations. One of them, and this is the one that we always refer to and or recommend because she's amazing, and her name is Stacy Jordan. She's a Safe Berks campus advocate. Her whole job is literally to go to college campuses and be an advocate and be there to provide support to students that are facing both relationship and sexual violence in their life. She can assist you with a lot of different things that can include like helping you write a victim impact statement if you are going through the process. It can even be just her giving you the options of what you have on the table. She can assist by going to your court hearings and things like that, or your student conduct or Title IX hearings. She can go with you to that. She is fantastic. Love her so much. Your other fully confidential resource on this campus is a counseling center, but it is not like it is only if you are talking to a counselor while they're in their professional role as a counselor. So like in session with them, if you disclose that you were sexually assaulted, they would have no reporting obligation because they can't break confidentiality. Those are your 2 fully confidential resources. Here at the Women's Center, the graduate assistants and the director and the office assistant, we have what is called limited confidentiality. And it's that like we still have to make a report. We just don't include the person's name. So there is like some anonymity, I think that's how you say it, in that process. But that's, you know, there's a lot of reasons why universities are like, report. But yeah, one last thing before we go, you are not alone if you are facing any type of violence in your life. And there are people out on this campus that want to help you and want to support you and want to, you know, just be there for you. And here at the Women's Center, you're always welcome to come. We are currently located in Old Main 126. We will be moving to Boxwood House. It's like kind of right across the street from Old Main. And yeah, we want to make sure that you're good and that you're safe and that, you know, you're supported, because no one should have to go through anything like any of the things that we talked about today alone. So yeah. Samantha, do you have any last comments or anything?
I don't think so. I think all I can say is that there is I run a peer support group on campus for survivors of sexual and domestic violence. that meets on Wednesdays at 3 o'clock. Yeah, 3 o'clock. And if you email me, I can give you the Zoom code, and I'll say my email real slow. It's SSMIT719 at live.kutztown.edu. And you can email me. I'll get you the code, and you are welcome to come to our meetings. And if you can't make the meetings, you're always welcome to try to figure out something else.
Yes. Yeah, I'm really glad that we started that, because there was definitely a need for it. And yeah, it's great. I really appreciate you coming on the show today. It was an impactful conversation, I feel. So I hope people are taking it away with some really good information. As always, I'd like to do some, end of show promotions of events that are happening here at the Women's Center. So the Women's Center partners with It's On Us, which is a national organization that fights against college sexual assault. It's On Us. There is the Kutztown It's On Us chapter is holding a spring week of action starting on April 5th and going all the way through to Tuesday, April 13th. And we have a whole lineup of events. On Monday, we have the Bystander Moment movie and discussion. That's at 5 p.m. It's hybrid, so we'll offer it both in person and online. And that's going to be held in AF 202. We got the Bystander Intervention Workshop. That's on Tuesday, April 6th at 6 p.m., also hybrid in AF 101. We got Surviving Together. It's a presentation on just general information about relationship violence and sexual violence, victim blaming, and how to help a friend that may be experiencing those things. That's happening Wednesday, April 7th from 11 to 12. That's also hybrid, but it will be held in MSU 183. Survivor Self-Care, like Samantha said, we got that. That's Wednesday, April 7th from 3 to 4. That's online only. And like she said, email her at ssmit719 at live.kutztown.edu for the link. We got a mindfulness yoga flow on Wednesday, April 7th as well from 4:30 to 5:30 on the DMZ. We got our clothesline project display of t-shirts of survivors of relationship violence. That's a really cool project as well. That's Thursday, April 8th from 11 to 1 on the Alumni Plaza. We got the escalation workshop on Thursday, April 8th, 2 to 3:15 in AF 101. We got Take Back the Night, Thursday, April 8th, 6 p.m., the Alumni Plaza. Rain location is Old Main Concourse. I think the whole thing actually might be held in Old Main Concourse. I think that was a change that we made. We got two pledge drives, one happening on Friday from 11 to 1 on the Alumni Plaza, and then the other one is happening on Monday, April 12th at 11 to 1 on the DMZ. We got a Know Your Title IX Jeopardy also on Monday, April 12th from 4 to 6. That one will be hybrid. It will be held in AF 101. And we got Walk the Talk with Greek Life. That's happening on Tuesday, April 13th, 7 p.m. We'll start at the Alumni Plaza and then we'll finish at the stadium. You can find all of the information or like descriptions and just more information about that week on It's On Us's Instagram, and I believe that is at It's On Us Kutztown.
I believe so. Or at Kutztown It's On Us, one of those.
Yeah. Yeah, you'll find it. Yeah, come out for those great events. They're going to be really informative and really impactful, I think. So, but yeah, that's all we got for you. Thanks for tuning in to Tough Topics. You're listening on KUR.